Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of yet another railroad podcast. Yet another railroad podcast about all things trains. All right, this week, what are we doing this week? We are gonna
Uh,
be.
oh, sorry. I thought you were asking me.
Well, I could have been asking you, but that's okay. Um,
No, we can start over. We can start
okay,
over. I'm
well, it's
sorry.
fun anyway. Who cares? We are gonna be looking at railroad records, and I don't mean the longest tunnel or highest bridge or stuff like that. I mean vinyl records.
Interesting niche, right? Like somebody had the idea of like, well, you have so many recordings at this time where they recorded video without audio. So someone had the bright idea of, oh, there's going to be a record in 50 odd years of people wanting the audio without the video. Like to me, that's quite interesting.
It's definitely niche, but you would be surprised at how many different recordings have been made over the years. Let me think here. In my collection, I've got probably 60 plus albums, but I mean, that's
Goodness.
scratching the surface. Yes, it's niche, but there are dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of railroad sound effect records out there.
Oh, for sure. And
So,
I mean, I would assume a lot of these records like are still used today for like model train sounds and whatnot, right?
I mean, with DCC sound systems, you don't really need to, but some people did back in the day.
Hmm.
It's not really a need to do that now, but
Hmm.
to start off, a lot of the early railroad sound effect records were actually designed for children. They were
Hmm.
typically pressed on 7-inch or smaller size little records, and they were just meant to be like fun train sound effects for kids.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Nothing really super serious there. I mean, yeah, they go out and record X, Y, and Z railroad's locomotive or whatever, but it was just meant to be something kind of cute and cutesy. And actually, um, some of these records were designed specifically to be played in accordance with your model trains.
That's cool.
So, like Lionel, for example, they released a couple little 7-inch records in the early 50s that were meant to be sound effects to be played with your trains. Um, I had one of those. I sold it because it was so for record nerds, you'll know what this is. And also, for you record people that somehow stumbled upon this, hello. Some of the early Lionel records were pressed as a picture disc. And so essentially, it's
Oh,
two layers of the vinyls, or another plastic material sandwiching a photograph, basically is all it is. Some of those early ones were like that. Some were just your standard vinyl 7-inch disc or smaller. But generally, the early railroad recordings were like that. They weren't necessarily something for the collector. They were more so fun things for the kids or fun things to put with your toy trains.
I have a follow-up question about this. Were any of those early records like the only known recordings of like X, Y, and Z locomotive, especially because it was so early? Did that ever
It's
happen?
it's entirely possible. I mean, of course, we don't know because they would just kind of put generic, like, if there was any sort of announcements, it was just generic express train this or whatever. There was no
Gotcha.
real specific reference to this railroad's locomotive or this or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair.
So that could very well have been one of the only known recordings of certain locomotive or whatever, but we don't know.
Okay.
Because a lot of those early kind of kid records like that, they didn't necessarily say, "Oh, it was recorded this, this, and this." It was just, here's some authentic train sound effects.
Fair enough.
Train records have really been around as long as vinyl records have been around. But they didn't really start becoming a kind of niche market until the LP actually came out in the early 50s. When did the first LP come out? 52, somewhere around there. Anyway, they didn't really start becoming a thing till around that time period. And
Makes sense.
again, some of those early ones were kind of those sort of sound effect records. They weren't necessarily meant to be like a serious sort of recording of X, Y, and Z's locomotives. Meant to be, here's some cool train sound effects.
Yeah, just like audio, stimulation there. I get
Essentially, yeah,
that.
for like radio programs, movies,
Hmm.
films, that type of thing. Um,
Gotcha.
an early one, I can't remember the year it came out. I'll look up. So an early one, we'll kind of vaguely go chronologically with this. So an early one was called Rail Dynamics. And that one, I can't remember the year that first out. It first debuted in 52 on a 10-inch LP, and it got repressed onto your standard 12-inch later on. I
Okay.
have a copy of this. And according to the cover, it was recorded on it was recordings of the New York Central locomotives. That's all it says, though.
Ooh,
So
that's
what
cool.
types, I couldn't tell you. Um, Fun fact about this record: For those of you who have played Roller Coaster Tycoon and the train ride, the little miniature train, the chuffing sound it makes when it departs the stations was pulled from this record. So if you're a record nerd and also
That's
like
cool.
video games, Rail Dynamics, go find a copy of it. That's where Chris Sawyer pulled the chuffing noise from.
That's a cool sample.
Pretty neat. So, but a lot of these early records again, they didn't necessarily they weren't intended for like the serious railroad enthusiasts, so they didn't really go into specifics on locomotives and railroads and all that stuff. Um,
There's some cool art. My goodness.
the
Looking at
cover's
some of
really
these.
neat.
Yeah,
That really
they're
kind of
fun.
dynamic looking sort of train, the thunderstorm looking thing. Um,
Mhm.
and then another kind of earlier one was put out by the Audio Fidelity label. One of the earliest, actually, true stereo recordings. This is probably one of the most common ones you can find. So if you're trying to find railroad sound effect records, this record is incredibly easy to find. They just called it Railroad Sounds. And
It's a
again,
good
they
name.
didn't super specify on it. I think, if reading the cover notes on the back, I think it was Illinois Central. I don't 100% remember. Um, that's at least what's on the cover. I can't remember if that's what is also contained in the record. Um, but again, it wasn't super specific, but it was a bit more leaning towards the enthusiast and meant to be more of a stereo kind of audiophile type recording. Um, I used to have a copy of this, and
So
then I sold it, but again, it's super easy to find.
what I find really interesting is like a lot of this stuff is starting to become more enthusiast oriented, like right at the end of Steam. Like
Uh,
you mentioned, like this looks like it came out in '58, right?
yeah,
And like to me, that's really interesting because '58, most railroads were not running Steam anymore. So they kind of are starting to miss their chance to get a lot of that
that's
Steam
a very
stuff
astute
in its era.
observation of you. So then, one of the first real kind of labels that was focused on railroad recordings for the railroad enthusiast, there was a group called the Railroad Record Club, and
Oh,
their first album came out in 1956. The first several albums came out on a 10-inch size, and they went to your standard 12-inch later on. But they were one of the first real groups that did serious recordings for the railroad enthusiast.
oh, they have
And
ones of electrics. That's fun.
yes, and so what you'll notice as we kind of go through this, Steam has always been the major focus,
Yeah.
but some labels and some groups have also done recordings of diesels and electrics and interurbans and trolleys and other stuff,
Oh, that's cool.
which is neat. So,
Yeah.
and so Rare Record Club, all the records were, each one had a theme, of course. You have a couple that were rear grand narrow gauge, which is another thing. There's a lot of rear grand narrow gauge records out there. But then you also had like recordings of traction companies like the Waterloo Cedar Falls and Northern, and even the Shaker Heights Rapid Transit, which is wild that there's a recording of that, but that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then like Illinois Terminal and the South Shore. So some really neat recordings. And
Yeah, that North
then,
Shore one's to me.
then I appreciate that. I love that. They were kind of one of the first real groups that really went to the actual railroad enthusiast for their recordings. Um, and then another early label, their first one came out in 1958. For our record people that are listening to this, if you somehow again found this, you'll know this name, Mobile Fidelity. They are most known nowadays for their famous original master recording, super high quality recorded records of famous and well known LPs. They started out doing train records.
Hmm,
And I
cool.
think they did, between all the different Mobile Fidelity record label names and versions, I think they've done like 30 something recordings. Again, mostly focused on Steam. First couple were just kind of some general recordings of steam locomotives, but they did notate, okay, this track is this railroad, this track is this railroad, so on and so forth. Um, Again,
Nice.
more tailored towards the railroad enthusiast. Their second LP was all Colorado stuff, which is pretty cool. I've got a copy of that.
Very fun.
Bit more obscure stuff like your Great Western and some Colorado and Southern stuff, all standard gauge, of course. But and then as they kind of went along, their LPs got more specific. Like they had one that was all specifically steam locomotives on Southern short lines. And
That's
then they,
fun.
they had another one that was Pacific Electric and North Shore recordings, which is really cool.
I was going to mention real quick with a lot of those Steam, like they're kind of lucky because those Steam operations, especially like short lines or Rio Grande, like they were running quite a bit later, so it was easier to be able to get recordings of stuff like that
Oh
as
yeah, no,
opposed to
absolutely. And I
like
mean,
B&O, which had like gone away for a long time.
oh no, absolutely. Like, and some of these recordings were, done of stuff that was still frankly around.
Mhm.
So that's why some of these kind of more obscure short lines got records dedicated to them. And I mean, and some of these recordings did have earlier locomotive types that were maybe recorded as a one-off thing by somebody and then later collected and put onto these records. So it
Okay.
wasn't just necessarily weird obscure things. There was also larger, like Union Pacific Big Boys and
Mhm.
even New York Central Hudsons, that kind of thing. But
Okay.
that was definitely fewer, more. That was fewer and far between.
Just
And
appreciate that they had the foresight to record a lot of things that would have been relatively new at the time, and nowadays is like completely extinct. Like as you were mentioning, like the diesels, especially, that's like a lot of rail fans don't have too much of a taste for that, especially back then. It's just really cool that they had the foresight to record a lot of that.
well, I mean, kind of. I mean, so talking the Mobile Fidelity label of their railroad LPs, there's only one of them that's actually focused on diesels.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, I mean, they did, but it was a lot of it was kind of a token effort, really, honestly, which is kind of a shame because there's some definitely some cool diesels out there. Um, Speaking of which, though, their one diesel LP was also in Pacific stuff called Mr.
That's
D's
fun.
Machine. Came out in 1963. Great record. And once again, for you music people, for those of you who are familiar with the Beach Boys song Caroline, no, the train at the end of that song was pulled from this record.
It's a
Specifically,
fun
the
fact.
track that's a recording of Southern Pacific's Owl, which is kind of cool.
If I look up Mobile Fidelity Railroad and you're the first result on there.
That's no surprise. But they also did a cool one that was all Mexican steam, which is neat.
Ooh, that is cool.
A little
I've had just
different.
not a lot of that out there.
No, not a ton. But that said, though, speaking of which, that's international flavor. I mean, railroad recordings are known the world over. I mean, U.S., England, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Africa, Europe. I mean, railroad recordings have come out pretty much on every continent. And I mean, in
Yeah.
my collection, I've got sounds from New Zealand and Australia, Japan, and England, and South Africa, and the U.S. and Canada, of course, and Mexico. So it's not like it was a specific, real niche sort of American thing.
Do you have a personal preference over like a country's like steam locomotives? Like which ones sound like the heaviest or
Well,
the
so
coolest or
I mean,
whatever?
of course, your American stuff generally is gonna sound, that's just how it's sized, of course.
Yeah. Beefy
Um,
trains.
but I mean, admittedly, I don't really have a whole lot of recordings from other countries, so it's kind of hard to say. Having a
Sure.
sampling of one record is not exactly a great sample size for
Mhm.
that. Um, so, I mean, yes, I would say as of right now, I see all the US stuff. So that's Mobile Fidelity, Rare Record. Those are two big labels in the US. A big English one was Argo and their Trans Accord series. They did dozens
Oh,
of LPs and EPs of English and Scottish and Welsh locomotives,
that's fun.
steam, diesel, electric, you name it. They did tons of things.
Oh my gosh, yeah, no
Oh yeah,
kidding.
we're talking well over 100 different releases, and each release was themed, which is awesome. So like the one I have of theirs, it's an EP of ex-Caledonian engines in the late 50s on British Railways,
That's fun.
which is really fun. But
Those
they've
are
done,
would be old trains by then. That's cool.
yeah, I know that there's definitely some older power by that point. But they have recordings of specifically A4s and like King class locomotives and Stanier and Bullion Pacifics and even the Snowden Mountain Railway, which is kind of a bit niche and really kind of neat. Um,
I appreciate that they did stuff for the preserved railroads. That's really cool. 'Cause
they
I'm seeing
did.
like Tally Clinton on here and
hmm
whatnot.
And what's kind of neat too is because a lot of their records came out in the late 50s and 60s, so Steam was still active, so they could still get
Oh
good
yeah.
recordings of a lot of this power, and even some early diesel power they did recordings of too, which is awesome. I think they have one that's like recording specifically like Deltics or something like that. Like that's lovely. I love that so much.
That's
Um,
very fun.
Yeah, they were probably the most prolific English labels. Um, and then outside of that, it's kind of hard in other countries to say, this label was like specifically this, because a lot of them kind of popped up as like one or two here and there on labels, so there wasn't like necessarily like a label that was really dedicated to like railroad sound effects. Now, admittedly, that's me just from what I've found through collecting them. There could very well be in other European countries and Asian countries that were like had labels that were dedicated to that. If they did, I'd love to know about them. But the ones I've
Looks like you're
mentioned are the ones that I can think of offhand that really were dedicated to railroad sound effects and didn't just have a railroad release here and there type thing.
looks like Argo did some stuff for Europe.
Yeah.
I'm saying like the French Orient Express and whatnot.
Yeah, no, they did. I mean, because there's some tangential ties in there, of course, with like, the boat trains and that kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
those are kind of your big labels. And then, of course, you had tons of little one-offs and smaller labels that did recordings. And what you'll find in a lot of the US recordings, they were either done by individuals or by labels. The individuals, if when they release them, sometimes were older recordings. So one example, if you're familiar with the artist Howard Fogg, who did a lot of really famous railroad paintings, he also actually recorded
Oh
sounds and
yes.
released a couple LPs, um,
Huh.
all of which were released on a local Colorado label here in Boulder on Owl Records. I have most of those.
Mhm.
His recordings were from like the early '50s into the early '60s, but they weren't released until like the early '60s. So you have some older stuff that by the time these records released were done and gone.
That's cool.
Oh yeah, The Power of the Past, that LP. So he had recordings on that
Yeah,
one
I was
of
just pulling that up.
yeah, of like some larger Pennsylvania like K4s,
That's
some
sick.
Baltimore High Articulateds, nickel plate Berkshires, that kind of cool stuff.
So you would have recorded that in the mid '50s, but not
Yeah,
released it for like another 5 to 6 years. Okay,
yeah,
that's cool.
yeah. And then he did one that was all exclusively large Union Pacific steam.
Dang. Did you do any international stuff? Because I know he
No,
had a
not
lot
to
of
my
like
knowledge.
paintings,
No, not to my
international
knowledge.
things. Okay,
His is all pretty much more or less Colorado based, excluding the one that has all the Eastern recordings.
gotcha.
One trend too that a lot of these railroad records, especially some of the kind of one-off releases, were generally sounds of what was existing. So a lot of the steam stuff you'll find tends to be a lot of excursion steam and short lines and tourist operations because that was what was around.
Yeah, makes
So you'll
sense.
find, like for example, there's a label called North Jersey. They did railroad LPs, and a lot of their steam ones are like of Reading T1s, on like the Reading Rambles
Yeah,
and that kind of thing. Because again, that was what was around.
makes sense.
Um,
Hard to record something that doesn't exist.
Well, yeah. And then another kind of railroad-based record was called Semaphore, and they did a bunch of different recordings, stuff like the East Broad Top, Nickel Plate Road 759, a bunch of different stuff. Um,
That's cool.
and again, it was a lot of preserved stuff, stuff that was just around.
Any of these
Another,
more? Did any of these later LPs did they focus on diesel at all, or mostly just
some of them did. So
preserve stuff?
there's a label called RK out of California. They did three LPs of diesels. So these LPs were released in the mid '70s. They did two LPs of first generation diesels, so like F units and early Fairbanks Morse and early Alcos, that kind of stuff,
Fun.
which by the mid '70s was scarce.
Yeah, yeah.
So those are cool. And then they also did one that was at the time modern diesels. So we're talking SD40-2s, tonal motors,
Okay.
SDP40Fs. I don't have that one, and I want that one because of that specifically.
Yeah,
GE U-boats, that kind of thing. So things that were current at the time, which is neat.
yeah.
Because
That's really
again,
cool.
diesels were have never really been a big focus in railroad LPs.
I mean, steam just sounds so much cooler. Like,
Yeah, I
even as
mean,
someone who appreciates diesels and electric, like steam just sounds freaking awesome.
yes, it's definitely more atmospheric for sure. Like diesel is cool. I love the diesel LPs, but the steam recordings are more atmospheric. They just are. Speaking of atmospheric recordings, I cannot forget to mention the recordings made by O. Winston Link, the famous photographer. In addition to his obviously many famous Norfolk and Western photographs, he also, during many of those photographic sessions, recorded as well.
That's
And he released 5 albums of Norfolk and Western sounds.
okay. Okay.
N&W was still operating steam when he recorded these in the late '50s. So these are all
Hmm.
authentic sounds of actual locomotives working revenue service, not some tourist thing or some excursion type thing. These are the real kind of real deal recordings. Really great recordings. Very well done.
Awesome. Yeah, I can imagine, especially like that whole railroad. Like, I mean, you've seen the photos, everyone's seen like the hotshot eastbound and whatnot. But like to me, yeah, that would be a very fun railroad for just the atmosphere alone.
hmm And that was nice about his recordings too. They were all very atmospheric, so it wasn't just here's a whistle or here's some chuffing. It was the whole sequence.
It's
So you'd
awesome.
have
That's seriously awesome.
the train in the distance, you'd hear it, but then you'd also hear the ambient sounds, crickets, cars passing by, all the ambient sounds, and then the train would come in and it would leave scene. So you'd get the whole picture. It wasn't just the snippets or the highlights.
Okay.
It was the whole package.
The whole kit and caboodle. Yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
awesome.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of that, that's the two categories of rare records, really. You have your atmospheric records, and then you have just your main, really just your sound recordings. The atmospheric ones are
Okay.
awesome, especially in stereo. Those you really have to hear those in stereo because it puts you into the scene a lot better than like a mono recording does.
Mhm.
Clarify for you
Sure.
that for those of you that don't really know your sound stuff, mono everything comes out of one speaker, all sounds, and then your stereo is split. Atmospheric records are awesome in stereo because it puts you into the scene and you get again everything. You get all the ambiance, you get the coming, the going, the movement, all that. But of
What to me is
course,
cool is like the foresight to record a lot of this stuff in stereo, and like they didn't even have like headsets and whatnot at the time, but now you do, and you can get
well,
like that
yeah,
full experience.
and that's what's funny too is that a lot of so especially when these were kind of coming out in the late 50s, early 60s, stereo was still kind of a new thing. Mono was still the preferred format. And so I think it's neat that a lot of people that recorded these sounds had the foresight to do it in stereo
Okay.
rather than do it in mono. And again, I think it speaks to the fact that it puts you in the atmosphere more.
100%. 100%.
And generally speaking, with railroad records, if you can get them in stereo, I highly recommend it. I generally don't recommend mono just because then it all comes out of one side. Stereo railroad records are where it's at. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, it's cool that they had the foresight to do it. That they went for the. Of course, nowadays, everything's in stereo, but at the
Mhm.
time, that was still kind of a new thing. And then that was the foresight a lot of people had was let's record it this way.
Imagine the hauling the equipment, because especially if he's taking all these photos at like the same time as he's doing the recordings. Like, oh my gosh, I've seen like his lighting setup where he has like 20 different lights to be able to get his photos. That plus stereo, like that's just crazy,
Oh
crazy
yeah, no, I
equipment
mean,
setup.
and not just Link, but I mean a lot of these people that were recording this stuff at the time some of the more serious operators, had pretty sophisticated recording setups to get all the sounds. Some people just had, a simple recorder and a microphone, but some had, a pretty sophisticated recorder, multiple microphones for different positioning, so you could kind of capture the sounds at all different angles. The setups could be pretty sophisticated. When it comes to the recordings, the one nice thing about a lot of them is that they did capture a lot of sounds of stuff that just frankly doesn't exist anymore, which I can
And
appreciate.
especially if you have like a recording like taking place in like a small town, you'd probably even hear like the old style cars and whatnot, like just really placing you in the scene.
Oh yeah, no, you get that. But I mean, just some of the motive power and stuff that in
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of these recordings just flat out doesn't exist anymore. And so it's kind of cool hearing what they would have sounded like in action is neat, because it provides a lot of context. Many of the photographs you see of many different locomotive types.
Mhm.
Now, when it comes to specific subjects of like recordings, obviously steam as a whole generally is the most popular.
Yeah.
When it comes to specific like railroads, I don't know if there's necessarily a specific one. Now, I will say that I do tend to notice a lot of like Rio Grande narrow gauge recordings, and I know if that's just because I'm have a slant towards that, but there are a lot of Rio Grande narrow gauge recordings out there.
It also probably helps the fact that it was around for so much longer.
That
Like,
oh, certainly yes. I mean,
yeah.
they didn't stop running until '68. I think too there was just a lot of that mystique around the narrow gauge too. So I think a lot of people are like, let's make recordings of them. And I'll be honest with you, with a lot of those, once you have one, you have heard all the other ones, frankly,
Yeah, I can't argue with that.
because especially by the time a lot of these recordings were made, it was the K36s and K37s that were in operation, so
Mhm.
they're not going to be that different.
Yeah, that's
So
fair.
they're neat to have. I like them. They're cool, but they're definitely one of those recording types that once you hear one, you've heard the rest.
Yeah, and they don't have nearly as much like bass as some of the larger steam locomotives. I feel like
Very
they're
cool to
still
hear
like
though.
heavy locomotives. Yeah, yeah. But like comparing that to like 411 or anything like that, it's like night and day.
Oh yeah, yeah. Of course, it's not. It's a 3 foot versus your standard gauge. Of course, it's going to be a little different.
Yeah.
You have your popular subjects, but then you also have recordings of really weird, obscure things too. An example of that would be there was a label in Colorado called Trainmaster that did 7 LPs of various
Oh,
things in Colorado. One of which was a recording of the Cripple Creek and Victor, the little tourist line.
that's cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
fun.
really neat. Like that's pretty
That's
obscure,
really neat.
but they did a whole album in 1971 of Cripple Creek and Victor sounds, which is kind of neat.
Love that.
That's the one thing too, is because it's such a niche area. You get a lot of your real popular subjects, but then like that, you get a lot of really weird, obscure subjects that somebody's like, I'm gonna put this on tape and then put it on a record.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Because why not? Oh yeah, well there's like another one that's recording of the California Western.
That's fun.
That is fun. And then another one that's specifically UP 844 on Sherman Hill.
I can see that doing well.
Mm-hmm. It's a
A
cool record.
lot of chuff, yeah.
Oh yeah, a lot of good noise on that one.
I love the sound of this is tangentially related. That video of 3985 like hauling that like giant like rake of stacks. Like, oh my god, the sounds of that are
Oh,
freaking
that's
immaculate.
delicious. That's
Mm.
delicious. That is a delicious sound right there.
I don't
But
know if
yeah,
there's a high quality audio recording of that, but
I
yeah,
wish that'd be
quite
cool
good.
if there was. And
I
I
love
love rare LPs because you get such variety. You get such cool sounds, and you get a lot of stuff. And especially if you find some of the overseas ones, those are neat too because what's the likelihood I'm going to travel to X, Y, and Z country? Probably pretty low. Here's some sounds of their steam locomotives.
man, what I do to hear like a cool like Soviet like track done in like the fog style. Like, oh my gosh, it could be incredible.
I mean, I highly doubt that even exists. If it
No, of
did,
course not.
yeah, right.
There's no way that exists, but
I
that'd
mean,
be a fun one. Like,
photography was even risky, so sound recording. Oh, good God, I can only imagine.
yeah, yeah, I'd freaking treat you as a spy. But that would be, man, some of those trains are freaking cool, like the 12-wheeled locomotives and whatnot.
Hmm. And also, too, what's neat is you get a kind of a comparison of them as well. Because like I have one that's all Japanese locomotives.
That's fun.
It is fun because it's definitely different because you get a smaller but also different whistles, all that kind of stuff. So totally different atmosphere.
I mean, in general, Japanese trains I feel are quite a lot more compact than many other countries, just because the much more twisty, winding trackage and whatnot. And so I
Hmm.
would imagine that doesn't sound too dissimilar from Colorado narrow gauge at a certain point.
No, not really. Now that I think about it, I haven't listened to it in a while. But from what I recall, really, there's certain sequences where you're like, well, let's get them recorded in like a Durango.
That's cool.
You have not only your trackside recordings, but you also have some recordings that were done in the cab. You'll find those pretty commonly on a lot of the ones that are of excursion steams, so like 4449 and 844, that kind of thing. You'll find
Mhm.
cab recordings, which are cool. A little different because
Very
it's a
cool.
little bit of a different placement, so you get the sounds are a little different, but you also get like some crew talk, radio chatter, other things you wouldn't get from your standard trackside recording. So when it comes to as well descriptions on records, obviously the ones that were tailored for enthusiasts generally tend to have better descriptions and not of what you're listening to,
Hmm.
locations, how the recording was set up. At the very least,
Nice.
you're gonna get here's what you're listening to, here's where it was recorded at, here's the year it was recorded in. Some labels go, some covers, some descriptions go as far as to saying, here's the train it was running on, kind of the time of day to provide a little more context.
Yeah.
Um, but your ones that are tailored towards enthusiasts, which vast by and large most of them are, you're gonna get some degree of description of what you're listening to.
This is like the '60s era version of railroad trail cam footage, essentially.
I mean, kind of. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, you have all your modern, like virtual railfan type stuff, but yeah, kind of,
Right.
kind of a '60s version of that lets you get that experience of something that you're not located next to, but you could still, at least in this case, hear it and read about it and kind of get a bit of a better picture of what you're experiencing or seeing if you couldn't necessarily travel however many miles it was to go see it in person.
Yeah, and be appropriately hyped when like one of your favorite trains or train that you're really excited to hear shows up and be like, oh yeah, that's cool.
Hmm.
I see
Hmm.
that.
For those of you that might be interested in picking them up. They're usually fairly inexpensive. I don't think of all the ones I've bought, I think there's only one that I've paid more than $10 for,
Sounds like an
just because
easier
again,
hobby to get into. Yeah.
you know, but again, they're pretty niche. Yes, some of them are definitely hard to find, but that doesn't make them expensive. For Steam enthusiasts, there's something for everybody. Obviously, if if you like your diesels, you're going to be pretty thin on the ground. Same with like electrics and that kind of thing. You're going to be thin on the ground, but those recordings still do exist. I passed up on one recently that was a recording of, I think, a Boston and Maine, I want to say.
Oh, that's fun.
Kind of different, yeah. When it comes to Steam, you have all your popular stuff. You have your Reddings and your Union Pacifics and your Southern Pacifics and your Rio Grande, Santa Fe, and Baltimore, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York Central, and all these different things. So when it
All
comes
the
to Steam,
classics.
oh yeah, all the classics, plus all the weird obscure short lines. So with Steam, you're hard pressed to not find something that would be appealing if you like Steam. Rare recordings are still released. Of course, they're all CD or digital now. They're not on vinyl anymore.
Vinyl, yeah.
Um, but they do still exist. People still do make them. But anymore these days, typically they're re-releases of a lot of older records. They don't. I don't think I've seen ones of like Amtrak. That would be awesome, actually.
That would be awesome.
That would be really cool. Um,
Did they ever release any of these recordings on cassette tape?
I have one actually, so yes, I can
Oh,
answer that question
actually?
with a
That's
definitive
sick.
yes.
It's incredible. I love that.
I,
Imagine someone going to work listening to their Walkman doing the freaking Patrick Bateman walking through the office while listening to freaking train noises. Incredible.
That would be pretty funny, actually. We're gonna wind back to the mobile fidelity stuff. So, as I mentioned, they're famous for their original master recording LPs. They did do some original master recording LPs of train sound effects. So, for
Hmm,
those of you that are claim to be completionists and collect all those but don't have the train ones, you're not really a completionist until you have the train ones. And there's four of them, so get on it,
sounds like a challenge.
right? I have one of them. It's the 844 one.
Nice.
Although there is a 4449 one, a one of the nickel plate Berkshires 765 or 759, one of the two. Um,
Yeah.
and I can't remember what the fourth one is right now.
I feel like 855 or 844 is a good one to have.
It's cool. It's cool. Like one whole
Delivery
side is a
partner.
half hour of recorded in the cab
Nice,
during
nice.
during an excursion. It's really neat, actually. Oh, and that's the other thing too. Timing on a lot of the rare sound effect records. Some of them are short, but some of them are like an hour long.
Okay.
For railroad recording LPs, it's not unusual for them to be 45 minutes to an hour long.
Dang. All right.
Because your typical, album generally is half hour to 45 minutes, but the train ones tend to be a little longer. Again, just because of the material. Especially, again, your more atmospheric records tend to be a little longer because it's the whole scene.
Hmm.
So it's not just like a quick, 30-second pass by. It's like a whole 5-minute sequence
Okay.
or longer. This will definitely be a shorter episode.
Yeah. It's
Just
not a
because,
whole lot to talk about, but like I still think it's a really cool subject because it's one of those things like I always find it really interesting. It became a lot easier to record the essence of locomotives and like especially video and audio right when most of these steam trains were going away. And to me, this is like kind of really cool because you start seeing like the enthusiast stuff right when the steam stuff is going away. Like I mentioned, like a one of those recordings we mentioned, the Argo one, doing the Tally Clyn Railroad, and I think that's like the perfect embodiment where you have like this preserved railroad, like right at the start of preservation, ironically being preserved in audio right at the same time.
it kind of has to do with that technology becoming cheaper and more affordable for people. So that's how some of these recordings could really come to be, is that your average person by that point in time, late 50s, early 60s, could actually afford like a home tape machine and
Yeah,
a microphone. So that made it a lot easier for people to get out and record this stuff. You
it's
could
like how
end
you
up,
see a lot more, like how you see a lot more like videos of train recordings and like RCA camcorders began to be a thing. Like yeah, you see like that time of the second things become more accessible, the more you see enthusiasts wanting to take advantage of that.
oh, 100%. And I mean, again, it kind of also goes into that evolution of technology as well. as technology evolved, these recordings became more prevalent and more abundant because the technology not only improved but also got cheap enough to the point to where the average man could go out and purchase it and then have fun
Yep,
with it.
100%.
So there's some
Yeah.
technological stuff here too, not just a we choo choos on plastic discs. Although that's
No, and
fine.
especially like, I mean, like I said, we were looking at the recording setup of like Link and whatnot. Like, my gosh, you have to have so much equipment to be able to do these sorts of things. Like, you have to take it seriously, even if you are at entry level.
Yeah, no, you really had to. The fidelity on some of these records, varies in quality. A lot of the real professional subs are excellent, sound amazing. Some of the more amateurish ones still sound pretty good because they took the effort. Some are okay. Again, I think equipment limitations there. It all depended on really how seriously whoever was recording it took the recording. Generally, you'll find, they were all typically recorded by enthusiasts, so they more or less generally tried to have a pretty serious setup, or at least one that got good enough audio.
Is there a group that whenever you like see them available for sale, you're always like, oh yeah, this is always the best audio I can get. Like this is my A tier level of recording.
I mean, the mobile fidelity ones, I mean, they're known for high
Okay, yeah,
quality
fair.
recordings nowadays, but their railroad ones are really good. Again,
Okay.
because the guy who ran the label in their early years took that time and effort to really get a good, proper recording. So you get good sound balance, you get good clarity, you get all that kind of stuff. So the mobile fidelity ones are some really good railroad records to pick up because the sound quality on a lot of those is really, really good.
Do you have any closing thoughts about records?
Oh, they're inconvenient, but they're fun. But train
Yeah.
records, if you like LPs and you like trains, I do recommend it. They're fun. They're fun listens. They're not always something that's a repeat listen necessarily, but they're still fun.
Yeah. For the vibes alone, I
Oh, absolutely,
imagine.
yes.
Like just chilling out doing, work or whatever and just hearing freaking train noises. Like, yeah, it's your equivalent of lo-fi hip hop to a certain extent.
Kind of, sort of, yeah, kind of, sort of. Okay, well, I think that's about it on the record front. Um,
Huh.
got any news? It's been a month since the last episode. Anything new, news-wise?
I find it really funny that the only railroads still opposing the Union Pacific Norfolk Southern merger are two merger railroads themselves. I find that really hilarious. The the only ones you have really opposing it at this point are BNSF and CPKC. I still can't say that properly. And to me, it's like it just shows like, oh, we're allowed to merge, but you're not. You'd be too big. It's like, come on.
Yeah,
For the record, I still oppose the Union Pacific Norfolk Southern merger. I just find that completely ironic because Canadian National recently removed their bid, and it's like, yeah, of course they would because they probably want to merge with someone else too.
well, yeah. I mean, much like you, I totally oppose it too. But
Mhm.
I think, I mean, I'd still appreciate that there's even major class ones that are like, no. I still appreciate
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
But I think we're gonna start hitting the point at some point here where it's like it's gonna happen as much as we don't want it to
yeah.
happen.
I think it's very likely. I mean, granted, I mean, people were saying this exact same thing about the shouldn't paint so fast, the Southern Pacific Santa Fe merger, but I don't know. I don't
I
know,
mean, that
man.
did
This
get
one
demoted
seems
though.
like it's. I know exactly, but like it ultimately got denied back in those days. But I feel like there's something different about this because railroads have been approved for merger pretty consistently. And again, like I said, that was what the exact same thing people were saying before Southern Pacific Santa Fe was. Oh, all these ones are being approved. Burlington Northern was approved. It's the huge landmark decision. So who knows? Things could be different. Could be a shouldn't paint so fast situation, but
Yeah, you
I
never
think
know.
it's
You
probably
never
gonna
know.
happen. Yeah,
We'll see. I mean, to be fair, a lot of people said that with the whole CPKC merger too, because like, oh, now they can run
that's
all the way
true.
from Canada down through into Mexico without having to change traffic with anybody. Um,
That's true. But
but
I
I
feel with
mean,
CPKC, their network didn't like. I mean, it wasn't like it didn't. monopolize anything to the extent that I feel the Union Pacific Norfolk Southern one
I mean,
would.
this is true, yes. I mean, because there's still other railroads in the U.S. that you can go top to bottom from,
Yes. Oh,
border to
100%.
border with. Um,
Yeah. BNSF still has their freaking Canadian division of like
yeah, yeah, they still
3 miles in Manitoba.
yeah, and so I mean, there were still alternatives there. I think that the big thing with the whole, UPNS thing is that it's like end to end one thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the issue because yeah, that's just it's too large of a network over too valuable of a real estate
Yeah, and I mean,
concern.
it's one of those things too where will it be too big to succeed? I think that's something that'll be interesting if it does happen.
Yeah. Because it doesn't have much parallel trackage except outside of like Chicago, which every
Yeah,
railroad does.
your major centers like that, but I'd be very curious to see if it does happen, if it becomes one of those situations where it becomes too big to succeed, simply
What's
because.
your oh sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say what's your proposed merger name for Union Pacific Norfolk Southern? What's it gonna be called?
I mean, the cool name would be Southern Pacific, but then I feel like you'd be trashing on Southern Pacific at that point in time.
Yeah, I think it's just gonna be Union Pacific.
And I
We're gonna
think that's the given. I think that was the case. I think that they even said that in the original proposal, like it's going to be Union Pacific still. It's not going to be some
fair.
combination name or whatever.
No.
Um, like Norfolk Southern will just flat out disappear.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, it is objectively a good name by itself, and I would hate to see Union Pacific cease to exist. I mean, I hated seeing freaking Canadian Pacific cease to exist because
Yeah.
there's a railroad with so much cool history and whatnot, and then it's
Hmm.
just it's 2 letters in a name.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we'll see what happens with that. It still hasn't, obviously still hasn't been decided yet. So we'll see what happens with that.
Slightly more uplifting news. Did you read that in Connecticut they're about to finish the restoration of an RS3 locomotive in full-on New Haven paint scheme?
Yeah. Man, how can you not love that?
Hey, I'm just excited to see the photo run opportunities of that because oh man, that's they're supposed to do a photo excursion for that, and I can imagine there'll be some
Man, how can
wonderful
you
things to
not
come out of
enjoy
that.
that?
Yeah,
How,
I just have we were going over our favorite paint schemes in a previous video, and all of New Haven paint schemes are absolutely fantastic.
they had some very
But
classy paint schemes. I would agree with you on that.
I like the McGinnis is obviously the best, but even like the ones where it's like the full on orange with like the black cab, like gosh, those are just gorgeous,
Yeah,
so eye catching.
they didn't have money, but they had great paint. I can say that much.
Yeah. Am I mistake? This is a tangent. Am I mistaken in remembering that the New Haven guy also did Canadian National, or are those two separate people?
No, those are two separate people.
Those are two
Um,
separate people.
no, McGinnis also had a stake in Boston and Maine.
Speaking of, yes,
So
yes,
the
yes,
so
yes,
the
yes,
blue
yes.
and white B&M that is also.
Yeah, and those are two very similar paint schemes,
Yeah,
but New
because they
Haven
were
does it
designed by the
objectively
same
better.
people, which was McGinnis's wife. Fun
That's
fact
fun.
for you.
That's fun.
Oh, yes, another fun little tidbit. At this year's Pullman Days in Illinois, they actually pulled the surviving Illinois Central heavyweight electric pair out of IRM and
Mhm.
brought them over, which is super cool.
That's cool. That is cool.
Yeah, because that's the old IC electric territory, so I'm like, that's
Yeah.
cool.
I just love the stations on that line so much. They're so old school and
There
vintage.
are some fun depots on that line. I would totally agree with you, but I'm like, oh yes, who doesn't love some sweet, awesome like vintage electric cars in the place
I
they
love that
originally
kind of
ran?
stuff.
How can you not
Yeah.
love that?
It's incredible. I'm glad that IRM is like chill with like letting their equipment go basically wherever.
I can appreciate that. I can appreciate that.
It helps if they have railroad access, to be fair.
Oh yeah. Oh
It's
yes.
not like they have to. Oh, sorry.
No, no, go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say it's not like they have to put everything on a flatbed truck and drive it like several miles or
Hmm,
anything like that.
also fair.
Like
Uh,
certain museums.
Another piece of new news. I think I told you this already, but for Via Rail's new motive power, they're going to Stadler for it, so they're not going through Siemens.
Freaking love that. Sadler is still my favorite railroad manufacturer at this point, I
So,
think.
so kind of breaking a little bit of that Siemens motive power monopoly, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, oh, that's great to see. That's great to see. I think Siemens has kind of proven that they can't really operate very well in extreme climates. And until they change that image of themselves, I totally understand, especially a Canadian railroad being like, if your train breaks down in a blizzard, that's not great.
So the rendering, it does look very Charger like.
Oh wow, yeah, but like a beefy charger.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, that's awesome. I like the Via livery in gray, especially. That looks gorgeous.
that's a neat. That's what they go with. That does look pretty neat. I do like that. Obviously, that remained to be seen, but yeah, I
Yeah,
mean
yeah,
that's
of
kind of neat that
course.
they're going with a different builder for the new motive power. Um,
I approve. And Sadler stuff is all still made in Salt Lake City, right?
I think that's where their plant is, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Um,
I love how they even mention in the description, including temperatures as low as -50 degrees Celsius.
you know,
Just casually freaking
got
dunking on
got to cover the bases.
Siemens' chargers. Yeah, yeah.
But they're going to be hybrid, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
And also apparently have a maximum speed of 100 miles an hour, so not bad, not bad.
Okay, not bad
Um,
at all.
so that's kind of neat. I like that. That's going to be a new thing to look
Does
out
Canada
for.
even have any track that goes over 100 miles an hour? Because I feel like it's like
I
Amtrak, we
don't.
have a couple, but I don't think Canada has any places where it
If they
goes over
did, it would be in
100.
like that Toronto Montreal corridor. That's the only place I could think of that if they did,
Yeah,
that's where it would be. Um,
that's a good question. Leave your answer in the comments if you think Kia goes over 100 miles an hour. I don't think it does. I feel like there's absolutely nowhere. Because even like the Toronto area, I feel like that's too built up with like grade crossings, and I feel like almost nothing of that is separated,
yeah, I don't
where it would
know.
even make sense to be able to go that
I
fast.
yeah, I honestly have no idea. Um, but yeah, so if you are Canadian and are watching this, leave us a comment. Let us know because I'm genuinely curious. I genuinely don't know the answer to that.
Yeah,
All right, what else? What other new fun things have appeared on the horizon when it comes
that's all
to?
I got for the last month or so.
Yeah, I mean, I kept trying to think if there's
Like
anything
it's
else
been a pretty
fun.
slow month.
Yeah, that's all I can think of is that.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's other stuff we forgot, but hey, whatever.
yeah, oh, for sure. We'll
We'll
cover it
pick.
next month.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, we'll probably think of it, and or it'll pop up tomorrow, and we'll be like, oh,
Yeah.
whoops, lol.
Oh well.
That's okay. Yeah, we can cover it in the next one. Alrighty, well, I think that'll do it for this episode. Like I said, a little bit of a shorter one. Again, a little bit of a more niche subject, but nevertheless, another episode. So,
Yeah.
thank you all for the 5 of you that tuned in. Uh,
We
and
appreciate your support.
of course, we certainly do. And we will hear. Well, you'll hear from us in another month or so. Alrighty, folks.
All right.
Have a good. Bye,
Take
everyone.
care. Thank you. Bye bye.